talking about mapping the mining structure to the source data column. Mapping. First of all, the term mapping, data mapping. Data mapping, it is a process of matching the fields from one database to another. It is the first step to facilitate the data migration, data integration and other data management tasks. See, whenever we have a lot of data which we are receiving through multiple data sources, they have to be mapped together. They have to be matched with each other so that the thing which is same should communicate the same meaning. So here we are discussing mapping the various mining structure to the source data column. That means the source to which we are keeping it. We have data scattered at different places. We have to map that data together and keep it at a particular place. So now data mapping. Data mapping, it is a process of matching the fields from one database to another. If we require to do the data migration, that means we want to take the data from one place to another. We want to do the integration, that means we want to club the data together, and whatever other data management tasks are required. So the very first step for us will be the mapping of data. Before the data can be analyzed for the business insight, it must be homogenized in a way which makes it accessible to the decision maker. Data, it now comes from various sources, and each source, it can define similar data point in different ways. For example, the state field in a source system. There is a particular source, data source, where we are storing a field, a particular field, which is state. Now, it may show if the state name is Illinois. If the name of the state is Illinois, at one place in the data source, it is stored as Illinois. But at the destination, it may store as IL, the short form of it. So that is how we have to map. We have to match one field with the another field, from one database to the another database. Data mapping, it has been a common business function for some time. But as the amount of data and sources increase, the process of data mapping, it has become more and more complex, requiring automated tools which make it feasible for the large data set. Like we have now lot of data floating all the time over various systems. Whatever systems we have, whatever computing devices we have, whether we have tablets, we have laptop, we have mobile phones, we have computer system, all the time, so much of data has been floating. So because of this large amount of data, it's not possible for us to manually check the data and match one data with another data. We require automated tools which make it feasible for working on these large data sets. So data mapping, what will it do? It will basically match the fields of one database to another so that they represent the same value. If we are taking the data from one database, we are taking the data from another OLAP cube. So we have to match that if this data, it is stored as with the name of this, at another place it is stored with the name of this. So when they are kept together, they should represent only one entity. It should not be kept into different columns thinking that they are different entities. We should have to match these entities together. So data mapping, it is a key to data management. Data mapping, it is an essential part of many data management processes. If not properly mapped, data, it may become corrupted as it moves to the destination. The quality in data mapping, it is a key to getting the most of your data in data migration, in data integration, in data transformation, and in populating a data warehouse. See, the data mapping, it requires number of tasks to be done. The very first task that we do for the data mapping, it is the data migration. Data migration as a word indicates moving from one place to another. So similar is a word it is used here, data migration. It is a process of moving the data from one system to another as a one-time event. Data mapping, it supports the migration process by mapping the source field to the destination field. That means it will take the data from one field which will be considered as a source. Now this data has to be moved to another location in another database. That will be known as a destination field. Now you have to map those things together, that if we are retrieving this particular column, like we are retrieving this roll number from any particular table. Now this roll number, it has to be stored in the destination with the same name at the same place. Like the roll number, it should remain the roll number in the destination also. So basically the process of moving the data from one system to another, that particular process, it is known as data migration. The second thing that we require for data mapping is data integration. Data integration, it is a data pre-processing technique which combines the data from multiple heterogeneous data sources into a coherent data store and provides a unified view of data. See, data integration. Today we have number of data sources from where we retrieve the data. We can have a flat file, we can have an XML file, we can have a database, we can have the data warehouse, we can have a OLAP cube. There can be number of data sources from receiving all the data. Now all these sources, they are heterogeneous. They are somehow different from each other. So now to combine this data from multiple heterogeneous data sources into a coherent data store at one single place, which makes it easily understandable and which will provide a unified view of data. If there is an analyst who wants to view the data, is it possible for him to open every data source which is in or which are all in different format to understand the data? No. We will have to first integrate that data together, which we are receiving from different data sources, and we have to provide a unified view of that data. So that process, it is known as data integration, that we again require for doing this data mapping. Then comes another task, which is data transformation. Data transformation, it is a process of converting the data from the source format to the destination format. That means we have some format in which the data is being stored at the source. We have to transform it. We have to convert this format to the destination format. So the process of converting the data from a source format to the destination format, that process is known as data transformation. And this can include the cleansing of data by changing the data types. It may also include deleting the null or duplicate values. At various places, when we keep on storing the data, we tend to have some duplicate values. So when we are creating an integrated view of that, should we keep all those duplicate values? No, it is not required. Keeping single value is enough for us. We do not require duplication of data, because that will, at the end of the day, may create some kind of anomaly, will lead to the wastage of memory also. So we do not require the duplicate data. And at some fields in the data sources, it may be possible that we may be storing some null values. So those null values have to be deleted. So that is what is being done in data transformation. Then aggregating the data means combining all the data to form a particular result. That is another thing that can be done during data transformation. Enriching the data or any other kind of transformation that can be performed while performing this task of data transformation. As the data is moved, the data map, it uses the transformation formulas to get the data in the correct format for analysis. So whenever we are transforming our data, that means we are converting our data from the source format to the destination format. So at that point of time, what do we require? We might have to use certain transformation formulas too, to get the data in the correct format so that it can be used for further analysis. Then we have our data warehouse. Data warehouse, if the goal is to pool the data into one source for analysis or other tasks. It is generally pulled in a data warehouse. So data warehouse, it is a full repository of data where we can store a lot of data. So whenever anybody wants the data, he can retrieve that data from our data warehouse. This data warehouse, it can store the raw data, it can store the summarized form of our data also. It might store some form of metadata also. That means some data which is related to our data can also be stored. That is known as metadata. Data about the data. So all that can be stored in a data warehouse. When you run a query, a report, or do analysis, the data, it comes from the data warehouse. So data in a data warehouse, it is already migrated, it is already integrated and transformed. So when we have data in the data warehouse, the previous 3 steps, they have already to be completed. The task of migration, that means moving the data from one source to another, it should be done. Integrated, that means we should integrate our data at one place together to give a unified view of our data. And all form of transformation, that means the data, it should be converted from the source format to the destination format. It should also be done. So data mapping, it ensures that as the data comes into the data warehouse, it gets to its destination the way it was intended. Data warehouse, it will provide us the correct form of data so that it can be used for the analysis purposes effectively. When the data, it has come to the data warehouse, it should be in a proper format. It should be converted into such a format so that it can be analyzed easily. All the duplicate values, all the null values should be deleted from there. All kind of transformation must already be done. So these kind of things, they have to be done. After this whole process completes, we store the data in the data warehouse. So these are the few steps that are being performed when we do the mapping of data. That means when we map the data, when we match the different fields of data together. Now let us understand the various steps that need to be followed for performing the data mapping. The step 1, that is define. Define the data to be moved, including the tables, the fields within each table and the format of the field after it is moved. That means the very first thing that we require to map the data, that means to take the data from one place and to take it to the another place and to match those fields. The very first thing that we need is to define the data for it. So define the data first of all, which is to be moved. That will include defining the data within the various tables, the field within the table. That means we should not only define about the table, we should define each and every field that we are taking in the table. Like if we are storing the information about the product, we are storing the product ID, we are storing the product name, we are storing the date on which the product has been purchased. So we need to define each and every field related to the product. And the format of the field it is moved to. Defining the field means if we are storing the product ID. So in which format it is being stored? It is being stored in the form of numeric, that means numbers. Whether it is being stored in the form of some alphabets, the text that we have, or it is being stored in the alphanumeric format, that means it is having some alphabets and some numerical terms. So we have to define this way every field when we want to map the data. So the very first step that we perform is defining the data. Second, map the data. Map means matching the source field to the destination field. Like from one place, from one table, we are retrieving our data. We are retrieving our product ID. So now this product ID, it has to be mapped. It has to be taken to some destination field. That is in at some other data source into some other table. So at that place also, it has to be matched. That means it should be stored in the same format. So we have to map the data. We have to match the source field to the destination field where we are taking the data to. Step 3, which is transformation. Transformation, if a field, it requires transformation formula or the rules, it is also coded. Transformation means if we need to convert the format of data. That means at one place, at the source, we have different format. At another place, we have different format. So it should not be so. We have to transform it in such a way that they should map with each other. And even the transformation, it might require cleaning of certain data. There might be some data which is of no relevance. So it can also be deleted during the transformation process. So the third step that we perform during the data mapping, it is the transformation of data. So step 4, that is test. Using a test system and the sample data from the source, run the transfer to see how it works and make the adjustments as necessary. So this is the fourth step which is to be performed. We need to take the sample data and on that sample data we have to run. If there are some changes which are required, then those adjustments are to be made depending on the sample data. So this is the fourth step. Now coming to the fifth step, which is deploy. Deploy means once it is determined that the data transformation it is working as planned, we should schedule a migration or integration go live event. That means deploy means actual execution, actual implementation. So once our definition, our mapping, our transformation and the testing process, all this is done. So now comes the fifth step, which is to deploy that, which is to execute that. Coming to the last step, which is the maintain and update. For the ongoing data integration, the data map, it is a living entity that will require updates and changes as new data sources are added, as data sources changed or as the requirement of the destination changes. So not that we have once done it, we have once deployed or our task is finished. No, we need to keep on maintaining it. We need to keep on updating it when the new sources are added or new data sources are changed. So at that point of time, this whole process has to be maintained and updated. So these are the basic 6 steps which are performed for the data mapping purpose. The next topic, which is using cube source. A data cube, which is also called as a business intelligence cube or the OLAP cube, online analytical processing cube. It is a data structure which is optimized for the fast and efficient analysis. It enables consolidating or aggregating the relevant data into a cube and then drilling down or slicing or dicing. So basically a data cube is one. It is a kind of data source. We are going to store our data. If it is stored in the form of data cube, our data, it will become easy for us to analyze the data in a quick way, in an efficient way. And since it requires consolidating and aggregating the relevant data into the cube, so on that consolidating data, we can also drill down or we can slice or dice our data too. That means we can opt out for whatever data we want. If we have 5 columns in the data cube, what we can do? We can retrieve any 3 items, that is known as slicing. We can create a subcube which is called dicing or pivoting data to view it from different angles. That means we can convert one column into one row. We can exchange the columns within themselves. So that form of thing which is called pivoting, it can also be done on the OLAP cube. Essentially, a cube is a section of data built from the tables in a database which contains the calculations also. That means all the time when the cube is built, all the calculations which are required between various columns, between various rows, they are automatically inbuilt when we are building the cube. So that is why it contains calculations for us also. So that will allow us to fast retrieve the data from the OLAP cube. OLAP cubes, they are typically grouped according to the business function, containing the data relevant to each function. Now talking about few of the advantages of data cube. The first advantage that it provides us is faster queries. Because the relevant data, it is aggregated in a cube, So it will speed up the data queries. Whenever a query related to the data will come, it will be quickly retrieved. So it provides us with the advantage of faster query if we are using the cube sources. Cube sources for storing our data. Then it provides a simpler user interface. Data cubes, they are considered by many data professionals to have a better user interface than the traditional data warehousing, which allow the users to more quickly work with data. If we store our data in the form of data cube, it will provide us the simpler user interface. It will provide us to quickly access the data and allow the data to work on with lot of ease when the data is stored in the cube. So we are using the cube sources for our data mining purpose, so that since we have large set of data, if we store it in the form of OLAP cube, so retrieving data from the cube sources, it becomes faster, it becomes easier, it becomes simpler for any data mining analyst. Now our next topic is configuring the algorithm parameter. You can change the parameters which are provided within the algorithm that you use to build the data mining model to customize the results of the model. The algorithm parameter here means like we take certain variables. The variables, it can be for storing some value. That means a variable, it can be A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, any variable. These variables, they are stored with certain values. Now these variables, they can change their values depending on the requirement. So during the algorithm, when the algorithm is run, these variables, these parameters, they can be changed. By default, we set certain value for that variable, and if we require, we can change those values. If no value is provided by the user, so that default value will be used. If we talk about the algorithm parameter which are provided in the Microsoft SQL Server Analysis Services, they change much more than just properties on the model. They can be used to fundamentally alter the way the data is processed, the way the data is grouped, and the data is displayed. For example, you can use the algorithm parameter to do few of the functions. Like first one, to change the method of analysis, like we do in the clustering method. If we want to change our method of analysis, what kind of analysis do we want? If we want to change the method of analysis, so at that point of time, we can use the algorithm parameters. Next, to control the feature selection behavior. We want to control that our selected features, they should behave in this particular way. So at that point of time, this algorithm parameters, they can be used. We can specify the size of item sets or the probability of rules. If we want to define certain rules for all our data items, so at that point of time, these algorithm parameters, they can be utilized. Then to control the branching and the depth of the decision tree also, we can use these algorithms. So these algorithm parameters, they can be used for number of purposes, and these parameters you can change also provided with the algorithm that you use to build the data mining model and to customize the result of the model. If a person, he wants to customize that how does his model operate, how does he function. So at that point of time, he can customize the result using the configuring of these algorithm parameters. Now comes few of the steps which are required to change an algorithm parameters. If we talk about the mining model, so on the mining model tab of Data Mining Designer in SQL Server Data Tool. SQL Server, why we are talking about it? Because this is the most commonly used thing for data mining. So in this SQL Server Data Tool, we have a mining model tab of the Data Mining Designer. We right click on that. So the algorithm type of the mining model for which you want to tune the algorithm, that will appear. And you select the option of set algorithm parameter, that you want to customize your algorithm parameter yourself. You want to keep certain values for the algorithm parameter yourself. So you will click on the option of set algorithm parameters. Now, the algorithm parameter dialog box will open once this option is selected. Now, in the value column, we will set a new value for the algorithm that you want to change. If you want to change the value of algorithm as per your requirement, so at that point of time, in the value column, a particular column will be provided where you will get the option of value. So you can enter, you can set a new value at that point of time. Now, if you do not enter any value in the column, in any particular column, so the SQL Server Analysis Services, they use the default parameter value. Suppose you don't understand, or you do not want to, or you do not require to enter some value. So at that point of time, automatically a default parameter value will be retrieved, as it is automatically set at that when it was building. The range column, it will describe the possible values that you can enter. That means for any particular thing, a particular range has to be provided. Suppose we are storing the data for the year. So your year, it can range from, if there is a particular organization, it store the year on which the purchases are being made. It wants to analyze the years. So the year, it can range from, suppose that organization, it was built in let us say 2000. So the range it will provide it 2000 to the current year, which is 2022. So that can be the range. From these range, the data can be retrieved. The value can be retrieved. If any value entered after 2022, like 2022, instead of that year, you type some unknown value like 2040, which is not yet come. So that value, it will come up with a particular box, dialog box, saying that unrecognized value or wrong value. So at that point of time, a range column will be described for yourself, and out of that range only you will enter the value. After this, we will simply click on OK. So the algorithm parameter, it is set with a new value. The parameter change will not be reflected in the mining model until you reprocess the model. So after setting the algorithm parameter, you will have to reprocess the model. So after the reprocessing, it is being done, we can change the algorithm parameter.